page 140. This is chapter 5 of the Sutta. Now here there's a diagram which we need to look at. Let me show it to the camera. See it here. What you can do is you can pause the video, look at the diagram for a while, then on page 140. Right, so we're kind of halfway through our study of the 5 meditations. These are the key teachings of the mind according to early Buddhism. So we have a body, since we have a rupa, since we have a body, we feel, right? Conscious of feeling, vedana. And when we feel things, we experience them as pleasant, painful, neutral. Okay? As feelings. Then how do we decide whether they are pleasant, painful, or neutral? That's called perception, right? The Saññā. So if you look at the Pali word Saññā on the whiteboard, you resolve the word as sun or con in the English. Actually it's more Latin. Con, just as in the English word connect, combine. You notice nowadays English word with a con or con prefix has the idea of bringing together. So it's very helpful we know all these basic elements of Pali. But it gives us a very good elementary idea or the roots of the meaning of words. And then you have Saññā. Saññā is a very common root meaning to know. Right? So here meaning to know something by putting together. Or if you like, on a technical note, you can say this is a kind of a synthetical way of doing synthesis. So how do we decide something is present? We put together ideas. Where do the ideas come from? They come from the past. These are our tools of knowing. In other words, here we're also looking at the psychology of knowledge, how we know things. We know things through recognition. We're recognizing past, or rather, reapplying, even projecting past experiences to present events. So this is a source of knowledge. Now, this kind of knowledge, however, is knowledge of the past. Knowledge of the past. Even now, as I look around, whatever I see, all in the past. The physicists also will tell you that. For example, the moment I look at the wall, those books, the image, the light, to be more exact, takes a few microseconds to come to my eyes. By the time it comes, it's a different image already. Of course, the books you don't see much different because the books seem to be static. But when I look at you, it's different because you may be sitting like this, but the moment my vision of you come to my eye, you already shifted the position slightly differently. Your thoughts change already. So this perception does give you information, but usually it is something from the past. Right? Of course, if you are more mindful, then you come closer to the present. How does that happen? How do you make it really come very close to the present? Mindfulness. Through mindfulness. Because the less mindful we are, the further back into the past we go, or we can even get stuck in the past. So we tend to look at people as we remember them in the past. We are not present. We are not aware of what's going on right now. We're not even aware what this person is trying to say, for example. And we know when this kind of situation arises, there are problems. For example, someone will tell you, you're not listening to me, something like that. So we practice this present moment awareness, for example, through breath meditation, which is a very good practice for present moment awareness. The breath is there, you watch the breath. So you're training your mind to link to the present moment. should be breath meditation. That is why breath meditation is one of the key meditations in Buddhism, and it's the method the Buddha himself used. Right? So, the next thing is we start forming ideas, new ideas if you like, about these experiences. That is Discourse, which we'll go into a little later this morning. Now, we're going to look a bit more closely at how perception occurs, or rather misperception, wrong perception occurs in our daily life. Now, so this is where we look at this sutta, Saññā Nānatta Sutta. Saññā means perception, Nānatta, Nāna, first part is Nāna, it means variety, various. You know, there's this forest monastery in Thailand, it's called Wat Pa Nānatta. Okay? Nānatta is Thai. The Thai, actually it's Pali, but it became, how should I put it, Siamese, became Siamese. So, same Nana, same pronunciation, but the second word is Jati. Jati becomes Thai, pronounced as Cha. You used to wonder how the other Jati becomes Cha. This is the Chineseness of Thai sounds. Thai sounds are basically Chinese. Because it is the ancient Thais that migrated from the north. You know? They were pushed down by the Chinese invasions or Mongol invasions. So they came down, down, down. And then, so the sound is basically Chinese, but the alphabet's language is very much Pali-based, Sanskrit-based. So, Jati, pronounced as Cha in Thai. There's apocope there. In other words, the last vowel is dropped off. So the E sounds missing, the Cha. Okay? So Nānatta means various countries, or better still, international, right? So Wat Pa Nānatta, the international forest monastery. So Nāna means various. Here Nānatta, the Ta at the end makes it an abstract noun. Meaningless, or simply in English we say variety, variety. The variety or variousness or diversity, in this case, the diversity of perception. Perception is diverse. We see things differently, right? So this sutta is interesting. In one reason is you can look at it as how teachings are transmitted. On page 141, section 2, you see this computerized diagram, very convenient. Look at it, you have a very good idea what's going on here. You see on the first column, diversity, first column you have form, sound, smell, taste, touch, mind objects, right? So you know these are called the elements. And then second column, perception, third column is thought, the arrows, yeah? And then you have fourth column, desire, fifth column, passion, and the last one is searching. So everything is done in a nice diagram. The pattern repeats itself. So this is a graphic representation of the sutta. So in other words, if we put into words, then you get the sutta on page 145. So you have two ways of looking at the Buddha's teaching. Diagram-wise, page 141. Word-wise, 145, 146. Another way of looking at this is, the diagram is a visual representation. You look at it visually, the teachings and the visual using words. And the other one is, page 145 onwards is what is called oral, A-U-R-A-L, oral or auditory listening method. So this sutta that we're going to study actually is to be heard. It's not much to be read, although you can read it, which we normally do today. But with the help of the diagram, you find it easier to understand this sutta. Now first, I want you to look at the diagram so that we are familiar, so it's easier for us to understand the sutta. Go back to page 141. So you see at the top, the headings are there: diversity, Nānatta, perception, Saññā, thought, Sankappa. Sankappa can also translate as intention. We'll talk a bit about this a little later. And then desire, Chanda. Chanda here is a neutral term. In other words, neutral here means it can be good, it can be bad. So this is a special sense of neutral, maybe multi-purpose if you like. And then passion, parilaha. Parilaha also means fever. And then searching, pariyesana. Here, pariyesana also is another neutral term, can be good, can be bad. And then this is applied to the 5 or the 6 elements or sense objects. So just look at the first line, form. There is form, and then there is perception of form. In other words, when you perceive form, you begin to think about it, third column, right? And when you think about it, desire arises. Craving arises, if you like. And then when there's craving, there is passion. Clinging, if you like. And then there is searching. You want more and more of it. So this is a segment of the cycle of 12 links. Number 3, links number 3 to number 7. Of course, all these apply to the 6 senses, so we only looked at form. So this sequence is another way of looking at the links number 3 to number 7, next page. Okay, so for those of you watching the video, here you are, this is a diagram. You can pause the video and look at this one if you like. Is it clear enough? Okay. So these are the 12 links on page 142. So you look at number 3, consciousness, and then down to number 9, thinking. In other words, this also explains how suffering arises in the present moment. So if you look at the 12 things, you have some idea. Let me briefly explain. Page 142. We begin with number 3, that is consciousness. We begin with the idea we have these 6 senses: eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. So we are conscious of various elements. They're called elements, dhatu. That simply means sense objects. In this case, sound, smell, taste, touch, and thoughts. So once something hits our eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind, we are conscious of it. Now what's interesting is, at this point, it's good to know that it gives us a better understanding of the nature of intention, or thought, if you like. According to the Abhidhamma, intention is present in every conscious moment. So as long as you're conscious, intention is there. So only when you're not really conscious of something, there is no intention. That's one simple way of looking at it. So when there is this consciousness, we project name and form. Simply put, name and form is what? For example, if I look at this thing, I have an idea which is like, oblong, cubic shape from far away like this. Let's say that it's not very bright. Slowly my eyes adjust and I say, oh, it's actually books. So I'm conscious, first of all, of a shape. Okay? So that's a perception, shape. It might extend to the idea that it's a book. And then I examine more carefully. I say, oh, there are words on it. And then the title. And when I look at the title, then after I decide, oh, I like this book, I don't like this book, then formations arise. That's another way of looking at it. So, first of all, I have to look at the shape. That's form. Okay? Then I name it in my mind. I call it hook. Oh, remember last lesson, this person looked at the rope. It's a shape. The round thing actually is a rope on the ground. and this, the light is very dim, this person sees this oil on the ground, and so that's the shape, that is the rupa, and then he thinks it is a snake. That is Nana. He gives name to it, okay? And then reacts according to that. So we are not actually reacting to that thing on the ground. We are reacting to the idea in our head, so to speak. Yeah? So name and form. So when I name something and there is a form there, this has to do with the six senses. In other words, it appeals to one of the senses at least. In this case, seeing. Okay? And the seeing, so once I define this as a book, my mind accepts the idea. There is visual contact. In other words, I begin to see it in my mind as a book. Okay? The eye sees it, the mind makes sense of it. So that's called contact, or phassa, number 6. And then the feeling arises. I begin to decide, I like it, I say, oh, very nice book, very colorful, and so on. Or I don't like it, I say, oh, I don't have this book, I read this book. So that is feeling. If I don't have this book and I see it's very nice color, very colorful, and it's free, I say, oh yeah, I want it, right? Which is okay. Or maybe I say, oh, this book is not good, you know. So that also is part of training. And then if I like it, I want some more. I feel, oh, this is good, I want to collect it. So that is clinging, right? So this is the sequence which the sutta explains. Okay, let's look at the sutta, page 145. Here again, notice the structure of the sutta. I have used a method. This method evolved as I considered the sutta. At first, I used it simple, you know, like a normal newspaper style of writing. Then I realized because the repetition of the Pali is good to use something like word pictures, you know, or some kind of, there is a term for this in poetry, I've forgotten the exact term. It's where you line up the words in such a way, you know, in Alice in Wonderland, you have this, the mouse is saying something and then the words started going round and round, you know. Something in cartoons you see this. So here I have divided up into paragraphs, indentations and so on. So it's easy on the eye. Because when you read this kind of translation, it tends to be repetitive. So once you rearrange the paragraphs and the lines, number one, the variety makes it interesting and you feel nicer when you look at it. Secondly, the intonation also prepares you for connecting ideas. Alright? So for example, let's look at the first part. The discourse on the diversity of perception, S 14.7, at Savatthi. Bhikshus, dependent on the diversity of elements, there arises the diversity of perceptions. Dependent on the diversity of perceptions, there arises the diversity of thoughts. Dependent on the diversity of thoughts, there arises the diversity of desires. Dependent on the diversity of desires, there arises the diversity of passions, or fevers, if you like. Dependent on the diversity of passions, there arises the diversity of searching. So these are the key ideas, the T6 as we call it. So on the left-hand side, you have the cause, if you like, the conditions. And then the right-hand column, effects, cause, effects. You see that way. Then in the next section, this paragraph is analyzed. What is meant by element? What's meant by diversity of elements? Okay. Verse 3. And what bhikshus, you have to put a comma there, and what bhikshus is the diversity of elements, Dhatu Nānatta. The form element, Rupa Dhatu, the sound element, Saddha Dhatu, the smell element, Gandha Dhatu, the taste element, Rasa Dhatu, the touch element, Pottabha Dhatu, the mind object element, Dhamma Dhatu. This issues is called the diversity of elements. Diversity of elements means the different kinds of sense objects. So here Dhatu, we have to be very careful with this term because Dhatu sometimes can also mean world. It can mean world. In a sense, in early Buddhism, the world and the senses are the same thing. Because what we experience, what we can experience, are our senses. And that's the world. That's our world. Okay? So in Chinese, the word Dhatu is translated as world. Notice the last Dhatu, Dhamma Dhatu. Here Dhamma Dhatu has no Abhidhamma or later meaning of some abstract reality. It simply means your thought. Okay? The mind objects, if you like, Dhamma Dhatu. What happens in your mind? In a sense, it's very easy to remember. In early Buddhism, we do not have not very many technical terms. Okay? The Buddha teaches Dhamma quite directly, without technical terms. Okay? Now I'm going to read through. If there's any difficulty, just stop me and ask me. Okay? Now then comes the reflection, further on section 4 before that. And how bhikshus is it that dependent on the diversity of elements, there arises the diversity of perception. Dependent on the diversity of perception, there arises diversity of thought. So this goes on. In other words, how one leads to another, just like in the diagram previously we saw. Then in answer comes the reflection, section 5. Notice 5 onwards, you've got the inner brackets 1, 2, 3. So this one gives each of the elements. So 5 brackets 1, that will be the form element. Dependent on the form element, there arises the perception of form. Notice, once you see the word dependent on, we're talking about dependent arising. Dependent on the perception of form, there arises the thought regarding form. Dependent on the thought regarding form, there arises the desire for form. Dependent on the desire for form, there arises the passion for form. Dependent on the passion for form, there arises the searching for form. So this is the teaching section. This is the key section of the sutta. In other words, you read this, or someone reads this, you can have a sutta reading session. You don't even have to discuss, you just read. And all you do is, you don't look at the notes, you even close your eyes, focus on the hearing, you listen to this, what I've just read. It's meant to be done better, okay? As a reflection. And as you hear this, let's say once a week you have Sutta Puja, you can call it, some people actually do this because Sutta Puja. They read original text of the Sutta and then they just go into meditation to reflect on it. And then certain realizations arise, and later on maybe they can discuss things. So this is how the suttas work. And I can tell you there are many occasions, especially the very, very difficult aspects of the teaching to them. I've tried to ask many monks, they themselves do not know this. So some of these answers just come like that, through reflection, through your own personal reflection. So this is the reflection on form. So this is the first diagram. Okay? So if you look at the diagram-wise, what I've just read, look at page 141 again. It is represented by the first line. Form is the oval shape, right? When there is perception of form, first arrow, there is the thought of form. When there is the thought of form, thinking about form, there is the desire for form. And when the desire for form, there is the passion for form. And when there is the passion for form, there is the searching for form. So notice the simplicity of this explanation. The Buddha uses very simple words: perception, thought, desire, passion, searching. So this is one way of talking about how desire arises leading to suffering. Another way is the section, the links number 3 to number 9 in the dependent arising.
This can apply to both good and bad things.
True, correct.
Meaning, let's take the word form.
Yeah.
You have all these processes, but at the end you're searching for, let's say, a Buddha picture, for instance.
Yeah.
So that is form.
Yeah.
So that can be a good thing.
Oh yes, it can be a good thing.
It can also be a bad thing if you're looking for Buddha.
Either way, entails suffering. You know, it entails suffering. Now let's say, okay, yeah, because incurs suffering on us. Let's say, okay, I'm thinking, I saw this beautiful Buddha picture, and I said, yeah, I want to get it. It's very hard to get. So I have to go through a lot of trouble to get it. You see what I mean? So good or bad, there is this wanting. As long as you want it, if something drives you, you have to go through a lot of trouble to get it. Okay? So suffering can arise from both good and bad. It's not just from bad. See? However, what's interesting here is you wouldn't mind that kind of suffering if you're looking for something good, you see. And ironically, if you're looking for something bad, you don't mind also suffering because the desire is so strong. But it's only when you sit back and you ask yourself, what am I really looking for, you know? And I don't really need a picture. Okay, if I can get it, it's okay. I'm quite happy with the one I have. Then, no problem. So we have to see the bigger picture. So here, what the Buddha is saying is, what happens when you have this kind of... so first of all, the Buddha is analyzing this kind of mental process. So understanding this mental process helps us, number one, to see things as they are, and we can still search for that beautiful Buddha picture, and the suffering will arise. In a sense, we get disappointment, we go there, and someone says, yes, I got the picture, you look at it, no, it's not a real picture. You still feel okay about it, and you still go on looking, and you're at peace with yourself, then it's okay. So it's good to understand the mental process here.
Remember last year, one couple went to Tibet, I think, and they insisted on reaching a certain mountain top on Vesak Day.
Okay.
They died.
Doing
so. Because of the cold and
that's interesting.
temperature.
I hope the person died happy.
Against the advice of the tour guides. The tour guide told them don't go.
Right.
They insisted on going just to have fulfill this desire. Match Buddha's birthday, viewing that particular place.
Yeah. So there are two ways of looking at this, you know. One is it's a ritualistic approach to things, you know, that you must, that the success is defined by an external act, right? And because of that, you know, the person lost his mind. That's one. Of course, on the higher side, someone might say, oh, you know, the person died happy on pilgrimage after 2 days.
It's back suffering.
Of course, it is still suffering. But the point is, if you're really wise, even though you may not see that mountain, it's still okay. That's why it's important to understand nature of rituals and vows. Because if we are too caught up with rituals and vows, then we begin to externalize goodness. We think that goodness is something outside. You know, for example, let's say there was one occasion I was teaching one of these centers. I was supposed to give a Sunday talk, but there's no more speakers left. Everyone is not to India, pilgrimage. Then once they're gone, then I decided to teach them one of those suttas. I think it's one of those Vacchagotta Sutta. It's a beautiful sutta where this Brahmin approaches the Buddha. And this Brahmin, he has a habit of baptizing himself, you know, going to the river and then come out pure every day so that he washes away all his evils and sins. You know? So it tells the Buddha, he says, you know, this river, the water is very sacred. Have you ever wash yourself there, wash away all your impurities? Then the Buddha told him, says, Vacchagotta, if you are morally pure, whichever well you go to, that is Gaya, that's Buddha Gaya. the holy place. Whichever river is sacred. So it's not a place you go to. Elsewhere, Nānatta Sutta says, if by washing you purify yourself, then the water reaches with the purified beings. Right? So, in other words, what the sutta says, contra the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, which is a late compilation actually, post-Buddha compilation, because this idea of pilgrimage is only found in the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, as mentioned. You go to the 4 holy places, and you go there with a pious heart, reflecting on the 4 great events. And if you should die there with that kind of mind, you will be kind of attain certain spiritual levels. Not awakening though. You'll be reborn in heavens, for example. Okay, that's the typical late kind of Buddhism going on to the Mahayana side of it. But in the Vajragotta Sutta, the Buddha effectively is saying, no need to go for pilgrimage. Wherever you are, if you keep your precepts well, that's your Buddha Gaya. That's your holy place. And if you are pure at heart, every day is a precept day. So then you begin to see, instead of ritualizing goodness, the Buddha is talking about goodness as an experience. So this is where the very busy, money-minded Chinese, we, how shall we say, we classify or we allocate certain days for certain holy events in the year. So only once a year we remember our ancestors. But as practicing Buddhists, you can do that anytime. And we should do that anytime. For example, especially a good moment like this, we are here, gathered together because of our good karma. We can sit here peacefully in this safe place, very comfortable place, studying the suttas, really at peace with ourselves. How many people out there on a Sunday today can do this? They can't. So at the end of this, we feel very good, very peaceful. And then we dedicate marriage to our ancestors. We can do that anytime. We don't have to ritualize it just one day a year, one day. That's the meaning, see? So if you miss that one day a year, Qingming or whichever day, or 7th moon or what, we still feel okay. No problem with that. We don't feel unfilial because of that. So this is where, in other words, as a Buddhist, we internalize this kind of practices. It becomes meaningful. We show our love to our departed beloved anytime we feel like it. We can be anywhere. The reason is simple, because the departed are departed. They're already reborn elsewhere, for example, in this case. Any other question? Yes?
Yeah. Our desire and our searching for cessation of suffering, Saññā Nānatta.
Is that clear enough? Yeah.
Defeats it, right? I ask myself this all the time.
No, not so. Not so. Look at the word chanda.
On the path, looking for cessation of suffering, desiring an end to it.
Okay.
Doesn't it become self-defeating?
No, not at all. Well, let's put it a bit more broadly. It can be, it need not be. Yes and no, okay? Let me explain. Yeah, you don't sound like a lawyer.
Under cross-examination.
Okay. Okay. Now, this is a very common way that the Buddha answers, you know. It depends on the level of understanding. For example, if someone like, you know, the example of this person wanted to see the mountain, you know.
Oh yeah.
The example of someone wanted to go to the image, for example. You know, that definitely is externalizing the desire. If you externalize the desire, yes, suffering. However, look at the word chanda. Chanda, desire, here's a little term. It's just a thought of aspiration, if you like. So in English, if the desire is good, we say aspiration. Aspiration, right? Aspiration is a good sense to it. On the other hand, if it is negative, we say what? Craving, whatever. See? So, in other words, what is the intention behind it? You can, in a sense, we cannot desire for awakening. It is oxymoron. You can't. That is true in a sense. What you say, doesn't that defeat the purpose? There's one sutta where the Buddha says, if you really meditate, you don't have to say, may I get one-pointedness of mind, may I get jhana. You don't have to say that. It will come naturally. In fact, it's very true, because you say, may I get this, may I get that, you're not meditating, you're thinking. Yeah? We do that at the end of our study, that's a reflection, telling ourselves, don't forget to meditate. Right? That's the purpose of it. So here, like I said, in a sense, if you say, if I desire for awakening, I will never get it. Because I'm not thinking about it.
You are thinking about it.
Right, you're thinking about it. In that sense, yeah, it's substituting. So on the other hand, if I reflect on impermanence, if I really practice it, that is more effective.
We reflect and all that also with the intention of searching for.
That is prepared. It's different. For example, I can say, I'm hungry, I want to eat, I have great desire to eat, but I don't make an effort to eat. But if I make an effort to look for food, prepare for food, I think it's not right to say the fact that I'm preparing for food is self-defeating. But when I prepare for food, I'm going to get the food, I'm going to eat the food. So if you actually do it, it's different. See? That is another way of looking at it. So reflection on impermanence is a positive act. I reflect, okay, everything's impermanent, so I'm letting go of negative ideas. Or even attractive ideas. I just let go of them so my mind is peaceful. So in that sense, there is no negative desire at that time. Another way of looking at it is we can say there are positive desire, negative desire. Positive desire is helpful. Insofar as you are not awakened, you need this energy of pushing you forward. It's called effort, so you've got right effort. But once you're enlightened, no more problem. You don't have that kind of desire, one thing or not one thing or another. Okay, let's continue a bit more. So, this is a reflection now. Let us now read together as usual. It's a tradition here. Once everything repeats itself, let's read together. Section 6, page 145. Section 6 on sound and so on. Dependent on sound element, there arises the perception of sound. Dependent on the perception of sound, there arises the thoughts regarding sound. Dependent on the thought regarding sound, there arises the desire for sound. Dependent on the desire for sound, there arises the passion for sound. Dependent on the passion for sound, there arises the searching for sound. Okay, just spend a short moment, just let this sink in. Okay, now we're number 7. Dependent on the smell element, there arises the perception of smell. Dependent on the perception of smell, there arises the thought regarding smell. Dependent on the thought regarding smell, there arises the desire for smell. Dependent on the desire for smell, there arises the passion for smell. Dependent on the passion for smell, there arises the searching for smell. But just let it sink in, briefly reflect on this process of smell. Let's look at taste. Dependent on the taste element, there arises the perception of taste. Dependent on the perception of taste, there arises the thought regarding taste. Dependent on the thought regarding taste, there arises the desire for taste. Dependent on the desire for taste, there arises the passion for taste. Depending on the passion for taste, there arises the searching for taste. Just reflect it for a moment. The next one, dependent on touch element. Dependent on the touch element, there arises the perception of touch. Dependent on the perception of touch, there arises the thought regarding touch. Dependent on the thought regarding touch, there arises the desire for touch. Dependent on the desire for touch, there arises the passion for touch. Dependent on the passion for touch, there arises the searching for touch. So just reflect on this process of touch for a moment. Mind object. Dependent on the mind object element, there arises the perception of the mind object. Dependent on the perception of mind object, there arises the thought regarding mind object. Dependent on the thought regarding mind object, there arises the desire for mind object. Dependent on the desire for mind object, there arises the passion for mind object. Dependent on the possession for mind object, there arises the searching for mind object. Just reflect on it for a moment. Again, the Sutta closes with a refrain, chorus. In this way, this is dependent on the diversity of elements, there arises the diversity of perception. Dependent on the diversity of perception, there arises the diversity of thoughts. Dependent on the diversity of thought, there arises the diversity of desires. Dependent on the diversity of desires, there arises the diversity of passions. Dependent on the diversity of passions, there arises the diversity of searching. Right? So now we better understand the meaning of diversity. In other words, in our daily life, we have this diverse sense of desire. One thing this, one thing that, the mind jumping here and there, all over the place. Right? So, this reflection is very important. Okay? So, once again, you can compare the two. Listening to the teaching, as we have done, reciting it, hearing it, and then the diagram on page 141. This modern diagram is a very quick way of learning it, but it's a theoretical perception of it. In other words, you say, okay, I understand it, and then you just shove it in your mind, forget about it. Nothing happens to you. Okay? So this reflection, constant reflection is very important.
When we say the last one, mind object overlaps the previous one.
Yeah, you can. Let me explain it in a moment.
Because in every one of the five, there's a bit of mind object.
Correct.
Yeah.
Why we have six is because the first five, they deal with the senses, they're sense-based perception. In other words, well, it's all the time this mind at the back, watching, doing, reacting, all these 6 or 7 processes, eye-based. So I see something, thought arises. Number 6 is the mind itself playing tricks on us, like in a dream, for example. Or as you sit, the thought arises, you see a picture in your mind. Okay? So the mind itself creates those experiences, its own process, without depending on the other 5. Okay? So there are altogether 6 kind of experiences. So now, how can we put this to daily use? You can use this as a counseling process. For example, for obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD. Right? Because some people, they really get caught up with wanting to do things that are out of control. You know? So, I'm saying this as a complementary kind of therapy. You know? So this is where the psychiatrists are really excited about such teachings, you know, because they're looking for ideas. And Freud, in a sense, failed. He couldn't get all this. He came up with some fantastic theories, but methodology is missing. So now the modern psychiatrists, mind scientists, they're having a field day studying the Buddhist texts, looking at all these suttas, and they are calling for ideas. They're gathering ideas from the Buddhist texts and using all this. So imagine if someone has got this kind of habitual tendency which is very negative, So as part of the counseling process, you explain to this person how that OCD or that is caught up with this habit, how does it happen? So you explain using this kind of sequence. Okay. Another thing is, as I said, if you look at the structure of this translation with all the architecture of the sentences, it gives you a good idea that the early suttas are like computer programs. The way they are arranged. In fact, you see how computer programs are typed, arranged something like this. So in a sense, because I have done some very simple computer programming 20, 30 years ago, so the idea of arranging it nicely, so easy on the eye, came to me from that experience too. So, in other words, we have to read a meaningful section for the prefect. So the key section is here, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 5, sections 5 to 10. That is the one that you can use for your reflection, if you like the sutta. Like I said, the best way is to take this and then listen to it as part of your daily meditation. You can begin by listening to this. You can recite Nānatta Sutta, you have to just start to recite and listen to this, and then switch off the tape and just meditate. You can take this as Dhamma Nusakti, if you like, recollection of the Any further questions? So that completes the module on Saññā, if you like.